Margaret, a retired nurse living a quiet and lonely life, receives a mistaken phone call from a young girl named Emma who meant to call her father. Instead of hanging up, Margaret talks with the child, forming a warm and unexpected connection. As days pass, Emma continues to call, and Margaret begins to look forward to the innocent conversations. Eventually, Margaret insists on meeting Emma and her father, David, a struggling single dad who lost his wife and works tirelessly to raise his daughter alone. Despite his pride and initial reluctance, David allows Margaret into their lives, and the three gradually form a close-knit bond that feels like found family. But their fragile peace is shattered when David's wealthy ex-father-in-law, Thomas Avery, launches a campaign to gain custody of Emma, using David's modest circumstances and past grief against him. Child Protective Services, CPS, shows up for a welfare check, leaving David terrified of losing his daughter. Margaret, fiercely protective of them both, decides to fight back. She writes a heartfelt testimony and speaks in David's defense at an emergency custody hearing, telling the court the truth about David's love and dedication. In the end, the case is dismissed. Emma stays with her father and now calls Margaret Grandma Ma. What started as a wrong number becomes the foundation for a chosen family built on love, trust, and second chances. This is a story you will want to sit back and enjoy. Before we start, I would like you to subscribe, like and comment on this video from where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. Let us begin. The rain tapped steadily against the window pane of Margaret Whitfield's small apartment. It was the kind of persistent, rhythmic storm that filled a room with quiet melancholy. She stirred in bed as her phone buzzed on the nightstand, its screen glowing with a number she didn't recognize. 3:15 a.m. Margaret had spent 30 years as a nurse. Late-night calls no longer startled her, but this one felt different. She answered with a groggy, "Hello?" A man's voice, low and panicked, came through the line. "Thank God. Please. I need someone. My daughter, Emma, she's burning up with fever and I don't know what to do." Margaret sat up straight. The desperation in his voice jolted her more than the hour. "Something about this wasn't right. Sir, I think you may have the wrong. You're the nurse, right? From the agency? I called 3 hours ago. They said someone would come." His voice cracked. She could hear it. Exhaustion. Fear. And behind it, the faint whimpering of a child. Margaret's voice softened. "Sir, I believe there's been a mistake. I don't work for any home care agency." Silence then. "Oh, hollow, empty. I'm sorry, I thought..." She should have hung up, told him to call emergency services, redirected him to the correct nurse. Instead, she found herself asking, "How old is your daughter?" "She's 7. Emma's 7. She's all I have. My wife passed 2 years ago. I've been trying, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's normal. His voice broke completely. Margaret's chest tightened. She remembered nights like that with her own children. The worry, the pacing, the helplessness. "What's your address?" she asked quietly. 20 minutes later, Margaret stood on a modest porch, rain clinging to her coat, medical bag in hand. The door opened before she could knock. A man in his late 30s stood before her, disheveled dark hair, red-rimmed eyes, grief and gratitude painted across his face. "You came," he whispered. "You actually came." "I'm Margaret Whitfield," she said gently, "and you must be Emma's father, David Chen. I can't believe you." "She's upstairs?" He nodded. "The fever spiked an hour ago. She's been asking for her mom." Margaret followed him up the stairs, past photos of a smiling woman with kind eyes. Sarah, no doubt. The girl in her arms had pigtails and a bright, toothy grin. In the soft glow of a butterfly nightlight, Emma lay flushed and restless. Margaret sat beside her. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm Margaret. Your daddy called me to help." Emma opened her eyes slowly. Are you a nurse? Like the ones at the hospital? I am, Margaret smiled. A very old one. The next hour passed in quiet care. The fever, though high, was manageable. Margaret diagnosed a respiratory infection, taught David how to give medicine, when to use cool cloths, what symptoms to watch for. Call her pediatrician in the morning, she said outside the room. David looked at her with disbelief. Why did you come? You didn't know us. You could have just hung up. Margaret hesitated, then softly. Sometimes we help each other. Not because we have to, but because that's what makes us human. By morning, Margaret opened her door to find David holding a casserole dish and Emma clutching a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures beneath a rainbow. Family, it read in uneven letters. Daddy says you saved me, Emma said solemnly. Margaret smiled through the lump in her throat. Sweetheart, I think you saved me too. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. Calls turned into conversations, conversations turned into dinners, dinners into Sunday traditions. Margaret found herself laughing more, looking forward to each visit. Emma no longer seemed motherless. David no longer looked so lost. One chilly autumn evening, as Emma twirled through the yard chasing falling leaves, David turned to Margaret on the porch. I've been thinking, he said carefully. That night, the call. I don't think it was wrong. I think it was exactly what we needed. Then he swallowed. Nervous, hopeful, would you consider moving in? Officially? Emma asks for her grandma Margaret every day, and I can't imagine our lives without you anymore. Margaret looked out at the little girl kneeling in the grass, gently introducing her doll to a butterfly. She thought of the quiet apartment she always returned to, the family she missed, the love she still had left to give. She turned back to David. Yes, she whispered. I think I'd like that very much. That night, Emma hugged her tightly. Grandma Margaret, I'm glad Daddy got the wrong number. So am I, sweetheart. So am I. But just as peace seemed to settle in for good, a letter would arrive the next week, one that would shake the foundation of their new little family. A name Margaret hadn't heard in years, a secret David had never dared speak aloud, and a decision that could change everything. The first real frost of the season dusted the grass silver when Margaret found the envelope tucked between a grocery flyer and a utility bill. It was plain, no return address, her name written in neat, unfamiliar print. She nearly tossed it aside, but something about the handwriting gave her pause. Formal, controlled, as if whoever wrote it had practiced, carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. Dear Miss Whitfield, I believe you knew my sister, Sarah Chen. I have reason to believe her daughter Emma may be in danger under David's care. I'm requesting a formal meeting. Please don't ignore this. For Emma's sake. Thomas. Avery Margaret stared at the letter, a chill spreading beneath her skin that had nothing to do with the cold outside. She read it again and again. Danger. David, the man who cried over fevers and read bedtime stories in funny voices. No, it didn't make sense. But the name, Thomas Avery, sparked something. She'd seen it before, on one of those picture frames in David's hallway. A younger man, standing beside Sarah, the brother, the one who lived across the country, the one David never spoke about. She folded the letter slowly, thoughtfully. Her pulse drummed in her ears. By evening, she couldn't keep it to herself. David was setting the table for dinner, Emma bouncing nearby, humming a made-up song about broccoli and unicorns. Margaret held the letter in both hands. I got something today, from someone named Thomas Avery. David froze, spoon hovering mid-air over a bowl of mashed potatoes. Slowly he set it down. His expression shifted, just slightly, like a door closing behind his eyes. What did he say? Margaret watched him closely. That he wants to meet. That he thinks Emma may not be safe with you. David laughed, but it wasn't the soft, tired chuckle she was used to. It was hollow, bitter. Of course he did. He's been waiting for this. Ever since Sarah passed, he's made it clear he thinks I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't raise her alone. Why? David looked away. Because I didn't grow up like they did. Ivy League, trust funds, connections. Sarah loved me, anyway. But Thomas never forgave her for choosing me. Margaret's voice was gentle. Did something happen between you two? David hesitated. A long time ago, before Emma was even born. It got ugly. He said if anything ever happened to Sarah, he'd step in, that he'd fight for custody if he had to. Emma skipped into the room just then, wrapping her arms around David's waist. Daddy, do we have marshmallows for hot chocolate? David blinked, composing himself. Yes, sweetheart, top shelf. I'll get them in a minute. She dashed out again. Margaret's voice dropped. Do you think he means it? David didn't answer right away. Then, if he's coming here, Margaret, it means he's already filed something. He wouldn't write you unless he thought you were part of the fight now. Wait. Ensure to subscribe, like, and comment on this story. Thank you. 2 days later, Margaret met Thomas Avery at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. He was sharply dressed, controlled, the kind of man who carried his own silence like armor. I appreciate you meeting me, he said, sliding a folder across the table. I'm not here to cause drama. I'm here to protect my niece. Margaret opened the folder. Inside, school reports, medical notes, even screenshots of David's social media from years ago. None of it criminal, but carefully chosen, spun in the worst possible light. I'm filing for custody, Thomas said. Joint if possible, full if necessary. Margaret's heart sank. Emma's happy, safe, loved. I'm sure she seems that way, but emotional damage doesn't always leave bruises. She closed the folder, lifting her gaze. You don't know David anymore. People change. Thomas gave a thin, cold smile, and sometimes they don't. That night, Margaret stood at the kitchen window while David dried dishes. Emma sat at the table coloring a picture of their porch, with the three of them holding mugs. David, she said quietly, we need to talk. But before she could say more, there was a knock at the door. David looked at her, at the clock. No one visits this late, he murmured. Margaret felt it too, a tension, sharp and sudden. He opened the door. On the other side stood a woman in a grey coat with a clipboard in her hand. Behind her, a police officer. Mr. Chen, she said calmly, I'm with Child Protective Services. We received a report concerning the welfare of your daughter. We'll need to speak with you, and with Emma. Emma looked up from her drawing, eyes wide. Daddy? David's voice caught in his throat, and Margaret's world began to tilt. David's living room, once full of soft laughter and quiet dinners, now echoed with the clinical tone of questions and clipboard notes. The CPS worker, Ms. Lara Voss, sat across from David, pen poised. The officer stood near the door, arms crossed but calm. Emma clung to Margaret's side, confusion flickering in her small, trusting eyes. Mr. Chen, Ms. Voss said, this is a standard welfare check prompted by an anonymous concern. We'll ask you and your daughter a few questions. It's routine. Nothing's been decided yet. David nodded stiffly. His hands were clenched in his lap, knuckles white. Emma, in her unicorn pajamas, whispered, Are we in trouble? Margaret smoothed a hand over her hair. Not at all, sweetheart. They just want to make sure everything is okay. And it is. The questions came quickly. Was Emma eating well? Yes. Was she attending school? Yes, perfect attendance. Had she shown signs of stress or fear? No, not unless bedtime thunder counted. Then came the photographs. Ms. Voss pulled out a printed image. David, 5 years younger, at a bar, arm around a friend. Another showed an overdue electric bill. A third, a vague post from social media that read, Some days I'm not sure I can do this alone. Margaret stiffened. That's from when Sarah died, David said quietly. I wrote that the night. We buried her. Ms. Voss didn't react. I understand. We just need to look at the full picture. Do you? his voice cracked. Because none of this shows her first steps, or the fever I stayed up all night for, or the sound of her giggle when I make my voice high like a duck. Ms. Voss closed her folder. We'll be back for a formal interview in 48 hours. Now Emma stays with you, but please don't leave town. The door closed behind them. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands over his face. Emma stood frozen, still holding her drawing. Her crayon portrait of the three of them now seemed almost mocking. Margaret knelt down beside her. Emma whispered, "Is someone trying to take me away?" David looked up, tears tracing lines down his face. "I won't let them," he whispered. "Not ever." But Margaret's thoughts were already racing. Thomas Avery wasn't just trying to scare David, he was building a case, and unless they found a way to fight back, he might win. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She sat by her kitchen window, pen in hand, the letter from Thomas beside her. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house, until she opened her laptop and began typing. She wrote a statement, a testimony, from the day she'd first met David and Emma to every moment since. The laughter, the growth, the warmth, not perfect, but real. By morning, she had 10 pages, honest, raw, and unwavering. She also made a decision. She would testify, in court if needed. At the emergency hearing that Friday, Thomas arrived with a sharp suit and a legal team. Margaret arrived alone, but firm. David stood beside his public attorney, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Emma sat in the hallway with a guardian advocate, coloring quietly. When Margaret took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. "I'm not Emma's blood," she began, voice steady. "I met her by accident, a misdial. But from the moment I heard her voice, something shifted in me." She glanced at David, who looked down, lips pressed tight. "I'm a retired nurse. I've seen children in pain. I've seen children in danger. Emma Chen is not one of them. She is loved, deeply, fiercely, by a man who lost everything and still gives her everything he has left." She looked at the judge. "Don't punish a man for grieving. Don't take a child from the only home where she feels safe. Because if you do, you'll be taking away more than her father. You'll be taking away her heart." That night, David stood on Margaret's porch, holding Emma in one arm, a court document in the other. "Case dismissed," he whispered. Emma squealed and threw her arms around Margaret. Margaret smiled, but her eyes were wet. "Told you, she's where she belongs." David looked at her. "No," he said softly. "She's not just mine, she's ours now." Weeks passed. One night, as snow began to fall in soft flurries, Emma ran out to the porch with a new drawing. It showed a small house, snow-covered, with 3 people holding mugs and smiling under. Christmas lights. At the bottom, she'd written, "My family, me, Daddy, and Grandma Ma." Margaret laughed, surprised. "Grandma?" Emma beamed. "That's what I call you now, 'cause you're ours, forever." David stepped beside them, wrapping a blanket around all 3. Margaret looked out at the snow, a deep warmth blooming in her chest. It had started with a wrong number, but maybe, just maybe, it had always been the right call.